Part 186. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanba. Chapter 1851. I nodded and replied calmly, I know. The next thing I have to do is to complete the battle agreed with Huo Qubing. Then the dragon energy of the three dragon veins and the energy of heaven and earth are refined in the sky coffin. After refining these two qi, I left the sky coffin and headed to the tomb of the gods. If things at the tomb of the gods can be completed smoothly, then I will go to the 9th floor of the sky coffin to conquer the last evil. After conquering the last evil spirit, my life will probably come to an end. After experiencing so many things, I have long been indifferent to life and death. But the only one who couldn't let go was Su Tianxian. I don't know if she can solve the inheritance issue by going to Yaokai this time. About 4 or 5 hours passed. Huo Qubing walked into the room. I opened my eyes and looked at Huo Qubing and asked, "Is it solved?" Huo Qubing nodded and replied, "It's solved. They have given up their obsession and plan to reincarnate." Huo Qubing looked troubled and said, "But they can't leave here, after all, there is a seal." I stood up and said to Huo Qubing, "Leave this matter to me. Now that I have the power of reincarnation, I can easily send these dead souls into reincarnation." Huo Qubing, Zhaomian, and I came outside the city. I looked around and saw countless dead souls entrenched here. There was no trace of resentment in their eyes towards me, the culprit who imprisoned them here. On the contrary, they looked at me with eyes full of gratitude. This makes me a little confused. I asked Huo Qubing in a low voice, "Shouldn't they hate me? Why are their eyes filled with gratitude?" Huo Qubing explained, "After they died, their obsessions affected their thoughts and turned into irrational monsters who could only kill. If you don't catch them here, then they will kill countless people. Such an existence cannot be tolerated by heaven and earth. Sooner or later, they will encounter divine punishment. When the time comes, their souls will fly away and they will never be reincarnated. It is you who gave them the chance to survive." It suddenly dawned on me that this was what it was like. I didn't talk nonsense to these dead souls, and directly stretched out my hand to use the power of reincarnation. A huge black vortex appeared in front of me. I stood next to the whirlpool and said to all the living dead, "Everyone, enter it, and you will start a new life. No matter what your next life will be, whether you are poor, rich, gain or lose, everything will be fleeting. Just like this world, everything has ended. What you followed and cared about during your lifetime will eventually be in vain. Time will smooth everything out." After I finished speaking, countless living dead all knelt down towards me and shouted, "Thank you for your teaching. Thank you for saving me. We will repay this great kindness in the next life." I waved my hand and said, "There is no need to repay your kindness. Living a good next life is the best way to repay me." As soon as the words fell, the living dead stopped saying anything and lined up, entering the vortex one by one. There are so many dead souls on the 8th floor of the sky coffin. This process of these dead souls whirlpooling one by one actually lasted for 2 days and 2 nights. The corners of my mouth twitched slightly. No wonder I feel so strenuous when using the magic circle. It's no wonder that there are so many dead souls without any effort. I did not stay by the whirlpool of reincarnation, but returned to the yard to continue resting. As for Huo Qubing, he has been staying by the whirlpool of reincarnation. End of chapter. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanba. Chapter 1852. It's Zhaomian. Zhaomian kneaded the formula with his left hand and recited the thunder curse in his mouth. He kneaded the secrets and recited the incantations very quickly. In the blink of an eye, the method was completed. Zhaomian didn't hesitate at all, and blasted towards the 49 living dead with one thunder technique. I looked at Zhaomian's posture as if he was going to blow the souls of these 49 living dead to pieces. I quickly stopped him and said, "Don't destroy them. Zhao Mian's hand movements stagnated, and the power of the Thunder Jew weakened a bit. Zhao Mian pushed out with a palm, and the thunder and lightning as thick as a bucket were like a spider web and engulfed the 49 living dead. Boom! There were bursts of thunder in the air. Dazzling thunder instantly filled the entire world. When the thunder dissipated and the thunderous light retreated, the 49 living dead had been blown away by Zhao Mian and fell to the ground in a mess. Seeing this scene, I was secretly shocked. I didn't expect Zhao Mian's heart to be so cruel. He actually wanted to beat the living dead to pieces. However, Zhao Mian was not a kind person from beginning to end. It's just that I have been in contact with him a lot recently, and I subconsciously think that Zhao Mian is not that bad. But I overlooked that Zhao Mian was once a murderous person. Betrayal, trickery, cruelty, these words used to describe bad guys are not exaggerated when used on him. Zhao Mian's sudden appearance directly broke the deadlock at the scene. Huo Qubing took this opportunity to slash the city gate with his sword. Just hear a loud bang. The city gate was split into two, and the two wooden doors fell directly to the ground, raising dust all over the sky. The moment the city gate was broken, all the nearby living dead stopped struggling and froze in place. The numbness in their eyes slowly began to disappear and became clear. I breathed a long sigh of relief when I saw this scene. It seems that Huo Qubing and I made the right decision. I closed the magic circle and collapsed on the ground, breathing heavily. At this time, Zhao Mian came to me and said, "Lu Su, you can do it. You can control such a large number of living dead. Even I may not have such strength and means." I glanced at Zhao Mian and said nothing. Huo Qubing also came to me and said to me, "You can go into the city and take a rest, and leave the rest to me." I looked at Huo Qubing and asked, "What do you plan to do with these living dead?" Huo Qubing thought for a while and replied, "Now that they have regained their senses, I just need to tell them that the war is over and what they have been pursuing has come to an end. There is no need for them to stay here because of their obsessions." I nodded. As a general, Huo Qubing understands the hearts of generals and soldiers best. It would be appropriate to leave this matter to Huo Qubing. I struggled to stand up and said to Huo Qubing, "Then I'll leave this matter to you." Huo Qubing nodded. Later, Zhao Mian and I entered the city. The wind from the ancient city gently brushed my face, as if I had traveled through thousands of years. Every inch of land here seems to be full of spiritual energy, which makes people feel relaxed and happy. Every plant, every tree, every brick and tile is telling people the mystery of the ancient city. Zhao Mian and I found a house and moved in. I sat cross-legged on the wooden bed and began to restore the dragon energy in my body. Zhao Mian looked at me and said, "The matter here is over. You should know what to do next, right?" End of chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 1853. I nodded and replied calmly, "I know. The next thing I have to do is to complete the battle agreed with Huo Qubing. Then the dragon energy of the 3 dragon veins and the energy of heaven and earth are refined in the sky coffin. After refining these 2 chi, I left the sky coffin and headed to the tomb of the gods. If things at the tomb of the gods can be completed smoothly, then I will go to the 9th floor of the sky coffin to conquer the last evil. After conquering the last evil spirit, my life will probably come to an end. After experiencing so many things, I have long been indifferent to life and death. But the only one who couldn't let go was Su Tianxian. I don't know if she can solve the inheritance issue by going to Yaokai this time." About 4 or 5 hours passed. Huo Qubing walked into the room. I opened my eyes and looked at Huo Qubing and asked, "Is it solved?" Huo Qubing nodded and replied, "It's solved. They have given up their obsession and plan to reincarnate." Huo Qubing looked troubled and said, "But they can't leave here, after all, there is a seal." I stood up and said to Huo Qubing, "Leave this matter to me. Now that I have the power of reincarnation, I can easily send these dead souls into reincarnation." Huo Qubing, Zhaomian, and I came outside the city. I looked around and saw countless dead souls entrenched here. There was no trace of resentment in their eyes towards me, the culprit who imprisoned them here. On the contrary, they looked at me with eyes full of gratitude. This makes me a little confused. I asked Huo Qubing in a low voice, "Shouldn't they hate me? Why are their eyes filled with gratitude?" Huo Qubing explained, "After they died, their obsessions affected their thoughts and turned into irrational monsters who could only kill. If you don't catch them here, then they will kill countless people. Such a existence cannot be tolerated by heaven and earth. Sooner or later, they will encounter divine punishment. When the time comes, their souls will fly away and they will never be reincarnated. It is you who gave them the chance to survive." It suddenly dawned on me that this was what it was like. I didn't talk nonsense to these dead souls, and directly stretched out my hand to use the power of reincarnation. A huge black vortex appeared in front of me. I stood next to the whirlpool and said to all the living dead, "Everyone, enter it, and you will start a new life. No matter what your next life will be, whether you are poor, rich, gain or lose, everything will be fleeting. Just like this world, everything has ended. What you followed and cared about during your lifetime will eventually be in vain. Time will smooth everything out." After I finished speaking, countless living dead all knelt down towards me and shouted, "Thank you for your teaching. Thank you for saving me. We will repay this great kindness in the next life." I waved my hand and said, "There is no need to repay your kindness. Living a good next life is the best way to repay me." As soon as the words fell, the living dead stopped saying anything and lined up, entering the vortex one by one. There are so many dead souls on the 8th floor of the sky coffin. This process of these dead souls whirlpooling one by one actually lasted for 2 days and 2 nights. The corners of my mouth twitched slightly. No wonder I feel so strenuous when using the magic circle. It's no wonder that there are so many dead souls without any effort. I did not stay by the whirlpool of reincarnation, but returned to the yard to continue resting. As for Huo Qubing, he has been staying by the whirlpool of reincarnation. End of chapter. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 1854. He refused to leave until the last soul entered the whirlpool of reincarnation. I collected the vortex of reincarnation, and after these 2 days of rest, my strength returned to its peak. Now is the time to fulfill your promise. Huo Qubing and I came outside the city. We stood opposite each other. Huo Qubing looked at me solemnly and said, "Lu Su, to be honest, I am no match for you now." As soon as these words came out, I was stunned on the spot. Even before the beating started, Huo Qubing said these words. "Give up? I don't see it." Huo Qubing continued, "However, since the agreement has been made, we must abide by it. Come on, Lu Su defeats me, and the Pajun star will return to his position." With that said, Huo Qubing slowly pulled out the long knife from his waist. I took a deep breath, lightly held my right hand, and Jingxiao appeared in my hand. "Bring it on." I point my sword at Huo Qubing. Huo Qubing and I faced off for a while, and Huo Qubing took the lead in attacking. He disappeared instantly. I frowned. Huo Qubing was moving very fast. I just blinked and he already appeared in front of me. Huo Qubing raised his long knife and slashed at me. I quickly blocked Jingxiao in front of me. Just listen to a clang. The long knife collided with Jingxiao, making a crisp sound. Before I could react, Huo Qubing raised his right foot and kicked me in the chest. I kept backing up, and Huo Qubing's feet were less than 1 centimeter away from my chest. I just escaped Huo Qiubing's kick. Huo Qiubing immediately jumped into the air and raised the long knife in his hand to slash at me. I can only defend passively. From beginning to end, Huo Qiubing never used the art of yin and yang. I think he just wanted to have a simple discussion with me, and didn't want to risk his life. Huo Qiubing and I fought for dozens of rounds, and I was constantly suppressed by him. My skills are not bad either, especially after my memory was unsealed. It was like I had gained several lifetimes of cultivation out of thin air. To put it simply, it means you are full of experience. However, at the age of 18, Huo Qiubing was appointed as the captain of Yao Yao and led 800 cavalry deep into the desert. He twice won the title of the entire army and was awarded the title of Champion Marquis. In the Battle of Mobai, more than 70,000 Xiongnu Zhuoxi and Wang's main force was wiped out. He pursued the Xiongnu army to Langjugzhu Mountain and Gaian Mountain, sacrificed to heaven and earth, and returned near the Hanhai Sea. This battle caused the Xiongnu to flee far away, and there was no royal court in Monan. Huo Qiubing granted Lang the title of Su and achieved supreme military exploits. Since then, sealing the wolf as Su has become the lifelong pursuit of all ancient generals. However, I also gradually found my form in the fight with Huo Qiubing. I went from being passively beaten at the beginning to now being able to fight back. As time went by and the number of fights increased, I was even able to suppress Huo Qiubing. In this way, Huo Qiubing and I were inseparable. I don't know how long the fight lasted, but Huo Qiubing and I couldn't decide the winner. The two of us pulled away in perfect agreement. Huo Qiubing's cold eyes shone with a fiery light. I could tell that this fight made Huo Qiubing use his hands and feet. In thousands of years, I have never had such a happy fight. Huo Qiubing's voice trembled slightly because of his excitement. Huo Qiubing looked at me and said, "It's not an option to continue fighting like this. One move will determine the outcome." I looked at Huo Qiubing and nodded, "What a move to determine the outcome." As soon as he finished speaking, Huo Qiubing suddenly burst out with a powerful yin energy. End of chapter. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 1855. Huo Qiubing slowly raised the long knife in his hand. Yin energy slowly gathered behind his back. Within a few breaths, a huge humanoid shadow appeared behind Huo Qiubing. This phantom looks exactly like Huo Qiubing. I frowned. Soul. Only immortals can make the soul leave the body. I think Huo Qiubing is a ghost fairy. And the momentum emanating from his body, his Taoism has surpassed that of ghosts and immortals. I didn't dare to neglect seeing this scene. I took a deep breath and mobilized the dragon energy in my body. Dragon energy flows slowly along my meridians, and the aura around me is slowly rising. I pinched the art with one hand and used the 9 layers of thunder art. I superimposed the power of thunder technique to the 9th level. The limit of the 9-level thunder technique is the 9th level. But my current conduct is comparable to that of the true God. The 9th level is only the limit of the 9th level thunder art, but it is not my limit. As I released my dragon energy, dark clouds suddenly began to gather in the sky. In the blink of an eye, the entire sky was covered with dark clouds. Thunder and lightning as thick as a bucket roiled in the dark clouds. The entire sky is like a huge mirror. But thunder and lightning split it into cracks. I slowly raised my hand to Jingxiao. The next second, the thunders hovering in the sky suddenly gathered together, and then turned into a blue dragon and struck straight towards Jingxiao. All the power of the thunder was injected into the sky. At this time, Huo Qiubing's expression condensed, and the soul behind him rose into the air, then raised the long knife in his hand and slashed at me. As Huo Qiubing's Yuan Shen slashed down with his sword, a sharp and powerful huge sword energy struck me through the air. This sword energy carries the power of destroying the heaven and the earth, as if it can cut through the space and cut it all together. The sword energy hit me quickly against the ground. The sword energy streaked across the ground, and a bottomless ravine suddenly appeared on the ground. All the thunder from the sky converged on the sword body of Jing Xiao. The sword of Jing Xiao is surrounded by blue thunder and lightning. The thunder is like a dazzling beam of sunshine in the dark night, dispelling the darkness and illuminating everything. I took a deep breath and slowly slashed at Huo Qubing. As I slashed down with my sword, the thunder condensed on the sword body of Jing Xiao poured out like a river bursting its embankment. A blue dragon opened its bloody mouth and attacked the sword energy. When the sword energy and thunder and lightning touched the whole world, there was a huge explosion. Immediately afterwards, I felt a powerful force knocking me away dozens of meters. I steadied my steps and didn't fall to the ground. My eyes were shrouded in dazzling light and I couldn't see anything clearly. After about tens of seconds, the dazzling light disappeared and was replaced by dust in the sky. I stared at the spot where Huo Qubing was standing before. As time went by, the dust slowly dissipated, leaving a mess all around. Even the city wall not far away collapsed due to our blow. Other than that, Huo Qubing and I only saw a huge deep pit. It can be seen from this that the attack we just made was truly devastating. Through the dust, I saw Huo Qubing. Huo Qubing was seen standing motionless. When the smoke and dust completely dissipated, Huo Qubing's pale face came into view. I was slightly startled. Who among us won? I just used all my strength, without holding anything back. However, I didn't suffer any damage, I just felt a loss of dragon energy. Just when I was wondering, Huo Qubing spat out a mouthful of blood, and then fell down. Zhao Mian, who was watching the battle from the sidelines, was secretly speechless. Tisk, 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 you are beating people to death. End of chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 1856. I glared at Zhao Mian. Zhao Mian shrugged and said, "Why are you staring at me?" I was too lazy to pay attention to Zhao Mian and quickly came to Huo Qubing's side to check his injuries. Huo Qubing was seriously injured. Although he was a ghost immortal, he already had his own body. All the meridians in his body were shattered by me. I regret a little. If I had known better, I wouldn't have tried my best. At this time, Zhao Mian came to me. Tisk, tisk, tisk. You are really ruthless. It seems that you don't have a specific understanding of your own strength. You possess the dragon energy of 99 dragon veins, plus the cultivation of all fox demons of the Su family, and of course the yin and yang power given to you by Zhangxia, and the half-life cultivation of Ksiddhagarbha Bodhisattva. You didn't hold back with this attack. Fortunately, Huo Qubing is a good man, otherwise he would have been out of his mind a long time ago. Zhao Mian is right, I really don't have a clear understanding of my own strength. After hearing what he said, I realized how risky my behavior just now was. If I accidentally beat Huo Qubing to death, I would feel guilty. I looked at Zhao Mian and asked, "What should I do now?" Zhao Mian said calmly, "What can be done? He is on the verge of death now. If no one comes to save him, he will definitely lose his soul. However, if he dies, he will die. Po Zhengxing can return to the palace." I glanced at Zhao Mian and said, "Why are you still so indifferent?" "Is there any?" Zhao Mian asked with some confusion, "have I not always been like this?" "Stop talking nonsense, how can we save him?" Zhao Mian said to me seriously, "I advise you not to waste time on irrelevant people or things. If he dies, he dies. It won't have any impact on the overall situation. You don't need to waste time and effort to save him. Zhao Mian is the most complicated person I have ever met. Sometimes, I think he is a good person. Sometimes, I feel that he is infinitely bad. Justice and evil are two opposite and extreme adjectives that are reflected in him. As the saying goes, one thought is heaven and one thought is hell. I have no control over the path Zhao Mian chooses. Since you refuse to tell me, I can only use my own method to save him. After saying that, I opened my palm and moved it towards Huo Qubing's forehead. I plan to use the dragon energy in my body to stabilize Huo Qubing's soul. As long as Huo Qubing can wake up, he can heal himself. Just when my hand was about to touch Huo Qubing's forehead, Zhao Mian suddenly reached out and grabbed my wrist. He sighed slightly and said, "Forget it, let me do it. You have finally achieved such a high level of morality. It's not worth wasting hundreds of years on him." After that, Zhao Mian picked up Huo Qubing and walked toward the city. I felt particularly heavy watching Zhao Mian's leaving figure. Zhao Mian is a person worthy of trust, but at the same time, he is also a person not worthy of trust. However, although he did many evil things, he seemed to do everything for me. I followed Zhao Mian into the city. The two of us came to the courtyard. Zhao Mian found a room to put Huo Qubing down, and then said to me, "Leave him to me, don't worry, I won't kill him. What you have to do now is to digest the dragon energy of the 3 dragon veins and the energy of heaven and earth. This process takes several years, but a few years have passed in the coffin and only a few months have passed outside." I looked at Zhao Mian and nodded. End of chapter. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 1857. I handed Huo Qubing to Zhao Mian, then returned to the room alone, sat cross-legged, and began to refine the dragon energy of the 3 dragon veins and the energy of heaven and earth. The next morning, Zhao Mian came to see me once. He told me that Huo Qubing was fine and it was up to him whether he could wake up. Then Zhao Mian told me that he was going out for a trip. I asked him what he was doing, but he didn't say, he just had something to deal with. Zhao Mian left the next day. He left quickly and came back quickly. Came back on the 3rd morning. What I didn't expect was that Zhao Mian actually brought me a lot of food. In his words, "I am just a mortal body, and there is no food in the coffin. If I don't eat, I will die sooner or later." I am grateful for Zhao Mian's behavior. In this way, Zhao Mian would go out every once in a while to bring back water and food. And I was in retreat inside the house. The days passed day by day, and a year later, Huo Qubing woke up. He found me. "Lu Su, it's time to fulfill my promise," Huo Qubing said to me. I smiled at him and said, "I thought you wouldn't wake up." Huo Qubing raised a wry smile and said, "I have known for a long time that I am no match for you, but I am very eager to fight with you. Now this wish has come true. Even if I die at that time, I will not have any complaints." I smiled awkwardly and said, "I didn't expect that I would be so powerful." Huo Qubing said to me seriously, "Before you used spells, we only used physical skills to compete. I knew that I was no match for you. After all, your left eye and left hand are disabled." After hearing what Huo Qubing said, I remembered my left eye and left hand. According to what he said, if my left eye and left hand were intact, wouldn't Huo Qubing be unable to defeat me in physical skills? At this time, Huo Qubing made the secrets with both hands and muttered something. After Huo Qubing finished kneading the magic formula and reciting the magic spell, he stretched out his index finger and lightly touched my forehead. "Okay, it's time for Pa Junxin to return to the palace." As soon as Huo Qubing finished speaking, I felt a force entering my body along Huo Qubing's hand. After a while, Huo Qubing withdrew his hand. Now that the Pa Jun star has returned to the palace, the 9 evil stars are just one short of the 7 killing stars. "Okay, my work is done, it's time for me to go," Huo Qubing said to me. I looked at Huo Qubing and asked, "Where are you going?" Huo Qubing shook his head and replied, "I don't know, the world is so big, I don't know where I should go, and I don't know where I can rest. That's all, let's wander around and experience the joy of being a human being. I watched Huo Qubing hesitate for a while and said, if you really have nowhere to go, you can come to me. Huo Qubing smiled and said, when I have traveled enough, I will naturally come to find you. By the way, Lu Su, I can't interfere in what you go through next, because I don't have the strength. If I force myself to be by your side and face everything with you, I can only be a burden. So, no matter how this matter ends, I hope you will not disappoint Huashiu's expectations of you. You better survive, because your life is not your own. I looked at Huo Qubing for a while, and then suddenly smiled. Okay, I'll try to survive. End of chapter. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 1858. Huo Qubing looked at me deeply, then turned and left. I looked at Huo Qubing's leaving figure, and I became even more determined about what I wanted to do next. After Huo Qubing left, I continued to retreat. Zhao Mian would bring me food and water every once in a while. Sometimes he brings snacks, sometimes he brings meals. One day I couldn't help but asked, I can understand if you bring me snacks, but where do you get the food? Zhao Mian rolled his eyes and said, of course I made it myself. I'm warning you. Don't hold it in your mouth. It's just a piece of rice, it's up to you whether you like it or not. Zhao Mian's words left me speechless. However, with Zhao Mian here, my life is also protected. When I was in seclusion for such a long time, it was Zhao Mian who sent me food and drinks. Sometimes, I really feel like he is my brother. Maybe, we are actually brothers. He is my evil soul, and then he has his own body and soul. In my heart, Zhao Mian is not my shadow, but a real person. I stayed in seclusion in the Sky Coffin for 8 years. 8 years later, I finally successfully mastered the dragon energy of the 3 dragon veins, the energy of heaven and earth, and the cultivation level of the Su clan fox demon. My strength now is so strong that I cannot describe it in words. That day, when I left the room, I saw Zhao Mian sleeping on the crooked neck tree in the yard. Since the souls of the 8th layer of the Sky Coffin left, the whole world has returned to normal. The world is no longer gray, but like the outside, with 4 distinct seasons and sunrise and sunset. Zhao Mian slowly opened his eyes when he heard my footsteps and said, is it done? I nodded. Zhao Mian jumped down from the tree, came to me and looked me up and down, then nodded. As long as it's done, it's time for us to leave here. I asked Zhao Mian, how long has it been outside? Zhao Mian thought for a while and replied, more than a year, I can't remember clearly. I stretched and said, I can finally leave here. Zhao Mian suddenly pulled me to sit down. Seeing his mysterious look, I asked with some confusion, what's wrong? Zhao Mian said to me, after we go out, there is a very important matter for you to decide. I was slightly startled and asked, what happened? Zhao Mian replied, Su Tianxuan's life and death. I frowned and asked, isn't she in Yaokai? Is there no way to solve the inheritance issue? Zhao Mian shook his head at me and replied, there is no way to solve the inheritance matter. The only fate that awaits Su Tianxian is physical and mental destruction. Now more than a year has passed outside, and Su Tianxian does not have much time left. Even if I try my best, it won't last more than 10 days. Hearing this sentence, I was shocked. Impossible. She told me that she has a high chance of solving the matter when she goes to Yaokai this time. She will not lie to me. Zhao Mian said calmly to me, you said it yourself, there is a chance, not absolute, and besides, how do you know she won't lie to you? Because. I was about to answer when the word Su Tianxian once said to me suddenly came out. She told me that she had never lied to me except about inheritance. And this time Su Tianxian went to Yaokai because of inheritance matters. I wish I could give myself a mouth. Isn't Su Tianqian playing a word game with me? This time she lied to me about inheritance again. End of chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 1859. Zhao Mian patted me on the shoulder and said, "This matter is a foregone conclusion, so you don't have to be sad." I looked at Zhao Mian and asked in a hoarse voice, "Is there nothing you can do?" I pin all my hopes on the legend of the Sky Coffin. But now it's too late. Even if Zhao Mian and I enter the tomb of the gods and eliminate the gods, we still have to go to the 9th floor of the coffin, and there is no time at all. Zhao Mian pondered for a moment and then said to me, "There is a way, but I don't know if it can work." I quickly asked, "What can I do?" Zhao Mian whispered a few words in my ear. I sighed slightly and said, "No matter whether this method is feasible or not, I will do it even if there is only a glimmer of hope." Zhao Mian looked at me solemnly and said, "You have to think clearly. This method may not succeed. Even if it succeeds, you and Su Tianqian will be separated by yin and yang, and there will be no way to see each other again in this life." I shrugged and said, "Isn't this my ending? It doesn't matter if I die, as long as she lives." Zhao Mian stood up slowly and said, "Okay, now that you have made a decision, let's go out and find Su Tianqian now, and then look for the Nuwa stone." I nodded and said, "Let's go." Later, Zhao Mian and I left the 8th floor of the Sky Coffin. The way to leave the 8th floor of the Sky Coffin is also very simple. There was a coffin in the city. Zhao Mian and I lay down in it. After a while, we left the 8th floor of the coffin. After leaving the coffin, Zhao Mian and I went straight to Ji Yuntang. On the way to Ji Yuntang, Zhao Mian asked, "Are you sure Su Tianqian is at Ji Yuntang?" I nodded and said, "Make sure, that is my and her home, she will definitely be waiting for me there." When I returned to Ji Yuntang had also been repaired. From the appearance, Ji Yuntang is no different from the previous Ji Yuntang, but it lacks an ancient and mysterious atmosphere. After all, the idea of the previous Ji Yuntang's existence was relatively old. Naturally, it is impossible to regain the same feeling when seeing Ji Yuntang again. The door of Ji Yuntang was closed tightly. I took a deep breath, walked to the door, and knocked on the door with my hands. Just when I was feeling uneasy, the door of Ji Yuntang was slowly opened. Su Tianqian stood in front of me in a white dress. I haven't seen Su Tianqian in 8 years. She hasn't changed at all, she is still incredibly beautiful. If you have to say something different about Su Tianqian, that is, Su Tianxian's brows are less cold and more gentle. Su Tianqian looked at me blankly. I looked at her too. Neither of us spoke. However, Su Tianxian's eyes turned red, and tears welled up in her eyes. "Tianqian, I'm back." I smiled at Su Tianqian. Su Tianqian threw herself into my arms, hugged me tightly and sobbed. "Xiao Su, it's been a year, where have you been for a year? I thought you had left me alone." "I have been in the coffin for 8 years, and more than 1 year has passed outside. Within this year, Su Tianqian had no news from me. Anyone would be worried. Now that she sees me standing in front of her intact, she naturally cannot suppress the grievance in her heart. Fool, how could I leave you?" I reached out my hand and gently stroked Su Tianxian's back. With my comfort, Su Tianxian's mood gradually stabilized. End of chapter. Sky Coffin. Author, Qing Nian Wanbao. Chapter 1860. Then, Su Tianqian led me into the house. The furniture in the house is all new and completely different from before. There is also a large sofa in the middle of the hall on the first floor. Su Tianqian and I were sitting on the sofa. Su Tianxian looked me up and down, and then tears fell from the corners of her eyes again. Seeing Su Tianxian crying, I asked in a panic, Tianxian, why are you crying? Are you still feeling wronged? Su Tianxian shook her head slightly at me. She stretched out her hand and gently grabbed my left arm, and then choked with sobs, Xiao Su, your left hand and your left eye. I was shocked. I originally wanted to hide this matter. But I didn't expect that Su Tianxian would see through it so quickly. Even though Su Tianxian saw through it, I subconsciously said harshly, Tianxian, my left eye and left hand are fine, you don't have to worry. Su Tianxian looked at me and said word by word, others may not be able to see it, but I can. I was startled for a moment and then realized. My position in Su Tianxian's heart is extremely important. Thinking about it from another angle, if there was something wrong with Su Tianxian's left eye and left hand, I would be able to detect it immediately. I smiled bitterly at Su Tianxian and said, Tianxian, it's okay. It doesn't matter. I stretched out my hand to wipe away the tears on Su Tianxian's face. Su Tianxian suppressed her sadness and said to me, Xiao Su, don't worry, I will find a way to help you recover your left eye and left hand. I smiled and said, okay, Tianxian, let's put this matter aside for now. Let me ask you, why did you lie to me that you went to Yaokai? Su Tianxian replied, I didn't lie to you, I did go to Yaokai. I was slightly startled and said, what about inheritance? Su Tianxian shook his head slightly and said, the inheritance matter has not been resolved. I went to Yaokai to extend my life and to spend more time with you, but when I came back from Yaokai, you disappeared. Where have you been for a whole year and a half? I felt heartbroken when I heard Su Tianxian's explanation. I told her everything that happened after I separated from Su Tianxian. After hearing this, Su Tianxian was silent for a moment and then said, I thought you carried me to the tomb of the gods alone. I pinched Su Tianxian's cheek and said, Tianxian, I promised you before that we will face the next thing together, how can I break my promise? Su Tianxian looked at me quietly, then nodded and said, since you won't break your promise, let's leave for the tomb of the gods now. I shook my head at Su Tianxian and said, it's too late. Su Tianxian was startled and asked, why is it too late? I looked at Su Tianxian with a scrutinizing gaze. Su Tianxian started to avoid looking at me like this. Tianxian, your time is running out. I slowly said the sentence. Su Tianxian's eyes averted and he said incoherently, nonsense, nonsense. I have already extended my life in Yaokai, and I can accompany you the rest of the way, so why don't I have enough time? Now that I am of high moral character, I can tell at a glance that Su Tianxian's soul is weak and may dissipate at any time. Tianxian, you can't satisfy me. You have at most 7 days. Su Tianxian's delicate body trembled slightly, and she whispered, you are right, I only have 7 days left, but 7 days is enough for me to accompany you to complete what you want to complete. End of this chapter.